Fantastic. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us today. This webinar is second one we've done in the past 2 days. The TribalP2 Action, Reducing Pollution and Saving Money at Tribal Businesses. Actually, Shasta, I was going to give it to you to kick it off. Like I've already gotten us rolling. Do you want to welcome us?
No. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hi, everyone. Shasta Gaughen, Environmental Director and Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Pala Band of Mission Indians. I feel like you guys have been seeing my face all over the place. I was just on a panel that at 9 o'clock on tribal research frameworks, and so if you were on that, I'm sorry you have to endure me again, but this time it's going to be mostly Josh. Thank you for joining us to talk about our TribalP2 Action Project. I don't want to take too much time on introductions just because we have a lot to get through. So I'm going to kick it back to Josh, who's going to be doing most of the heavy lifting today.
Thanks, Shasta. So first of all, I want to say happy 30th anniversary to the Pollution Prevention Act, which is the source of the funding for this project and is relevant to the GAP grant and others that include pollution prevention. And I'll talk a little more about what pollution prevention is because it's not necessarily a very common term in the environmental field. But the Pollution Prevention Act was first passed in, I guess, 1990. And they actually, a few weeks ago, was Pollution Prevention Act Week. So thanks for joining us. Shasta already introduced herself. Jessica Counts-Arnold is not going to be able to join us today. She's the EPA project officer that has been working with Paula and us on this project and is participating in all the webinars that we've been doing regarding this project, and we definitely appreciate her contributions. John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. John Flores, Environmental Director for the SanPasqual Band of Indians. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you.
Thanks, and I'm Josh Simmons. I'm with Prosper Sustainably. Prosper is the lead consulting group on this project, working with Michael Burr and Scott from Microgrid Institute and Wood Environmental. And prior to founding Prosper Sustainably in 2014, I was the environmental director for the San Diego Chumash for 7 years. So Michael Burr.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. My name is Michael Burr. I'm the director of Microgrid Institute and principal consultant for Burr Energy LLC. We're a consultancy that helps communities and tribes focus on resiliency and sustainability and to develop projects and systems that will improve their energy sustainability and resiliency. I've been working with Prosper Sustainably as well as the Pala and SanPasqual bands and some other Native American tribes to do those things in recent years, and looking forward to participating in this webinar.
Thanks, Michael. Scott?
Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Brown. I'm a senior environmental scientist for Wood, Environment, and Infrastructure. I've been working on this project primarily from a hazardous material and hazardous waste and water conservation standpoint. We do a lot of these pollution prevention studies here in the West for the Navy and Marine Corps. So it's been a really exciting opportunity to apply what we've learned doing these studies for the military to tribal organizations and businesses. And I'm very glad to be with you today.
Thank you, Scott. So here's our agenda for today's webinar, and I encourage you all to, I think you've already been doing it so far, but sharing your name and which tribe organization you're with in the chat box. I also am hoping that you can share your biggest pollution prevention related challenge in the areas of hazardous substances, water, or energy, or any kind of major question you are hoping to have answered today relating to either tribal business or tribal businesses that you work with, or even government facilities or beyond. I'm going to do a brief overview of the TribalP2 Action Project. We'll touch upon the Green Business Network and a California-related opportunity there. And the meat of the presentation is going to focus on TribalP2 planning and implementation. I also encourage you to ask questions throughout using the chat box as well. If we have time at the end, we can answer some of those there too, but we'll try to address those as they come up throughout the presentation. So we just concluded an 8-part online event series under the TribalP2 Action Project, and these are all published. Recordings of these and slides, as well as associated resources, are all published at TribalP2Action.org/latest. The webinars 1 and then the last webinar, number 5, first we'll kind of talk about the general planning and implementation processes, and then the webinars and roundtables in between were more media or topic specific. So we had one focused on hazardous substances, and then we moved to water and then to energy. And our roundtables, the first one was focusing on hazardous COVID and use of hazardous substances at tribal businesses. Our second roundtable focused on landscaping strategy for saving water and money at tribal businesses. And then the third one, the third roundtable focused on energy storage. So I encourage you to go to that website and view these recordings, and you're welcome to reach out to us for any additional information. The Intertribal Pollution Prevention Project, also known as the TribalP2 Action Project, is, as I mentioned, it's funded by an EPA Pollution Prevention Grant that was awarded to Pala Band of Mission Indians, who are administering the grant program. It is a collaboration between Pala, SanPasqual, the EPA, Prosper Sustainably, Microgrid Institute, Wood, California Green Business Network's also been supporting us, among others. And there's two major components of the project. There's the kind of local aspect of the project focusing on pollution prevention assessments and action planning for various Pala businesses and the SanPasqual's Woods Valley Golf Club. That's also including some local employee training and green team type activities. And those businesses are listed there and will be touched upon as we move throughout this presentation, some specific P2 measures we've identified at those facilities. And then what we're doing right now is part of kind of our national training capacity building. That included the 8-part webinar series, and everything we're publishing on TribalP2Action.org. So if you're not aware of where Pala and SanPasqual are, they are approximately halfway between Los Angeles and Tijuana in northeast San Diego County. And I've been out there many times, but that's where Shasta and John are currently, I believe, hanging out. So as I mentioned, pollution prevention is not necessarily a standard term of art in this industry, so I wanted to define it. It's any practice that reduces, eliminates, or prevents pollution at its source. I think that it's more commonly known as sustainability or greening. The P2 hierarchy is provided on the right. It's really the kind of in terms of pollution prevention is the kind of first thing you want to do. You want to reduce your pollution sources before then proceeding to reusing, recycling, treating, or as a last resort, disposing of a resource or pollution source, or disposing or releasing. You can learn more about the EPA Pollution Prevention Program at this link. They have annual funding, or actually semi-annual funding for, I think, both the P2 and source reduction grants, as well as other funding opportunities. There's a variety of resources, technical assistance, and other resources at this website, so I encourage you to go there to learn more. Some related resources, we have our own resources page that we just got up and running, and we'll continue to add additional resources categorized here. This includes various guides, BMPs, templates, other stuff that's related to the topics we're covering, as well as some funding opportunities. I also want to mention some specific programs related to pollution prevention. EPA's Safer Choice for cleaning chemicals is one we've mentioned. We focused on that in the COVID-related roundtable. The Energy Star program and Energy Star Portfolio Manager we discussed during the energy-focused webinar. EPA's Water Sense program was discussed during the landscape-related saving water and landscaping-related roundtable discussion. And then the Department of Energy Indian Energy Policy and Programs offers funding and technical assistance for tribal energy projects, which was discussed during the 4th webinar on energy. I also want to do kind of a brief plug if you joined us yesterday for the California Tribal Gap Analysis. That's a new project in California focusing on identifying and providing recommendations for climate and energy related gaps in California. I provide the website here. Unfortunately, I did something to update it recently. The website's now down, but I do encourage you, if you're interested, to go to the website and sign up. In the meantime, feel free to send me an email if you want to make sure that you're aware about this. We're going to be circling back and requesting information and involvement from all tribes throughout California. I want to talk about briefly about the green business networks that are available, because they overlap a lot of the activities that we're doing and are a really good starting point for doing pollution prevention at tribal businesses and other facilities. I do want to mention that even though we keep talking about tribal businesses, that the concepts, the practices, the strategies we're talking about are really applicable to not just businesses, but tribal government facilities and even households as well within tribal communities. And I included a few different examples here. In particular, here in Region 9, we have California's, Nevada's is green up in the middle, and then Arizona's is on the right, and then I just, other examples of other ones and other states as well. Many states throughout the U.S. have green business network programs or some form of green business type related certification or network. So I encourage you to go in your state and learn a bit more. And I want to turn it over to Joe Fleming, who's the Executive Director of the California Green Business Network, really quick to mention a specific opportunity for tribes that's available right now. And Joe?
Thanks so much, Josh, and hello, everyone. My name's Joe Fleming. I'm the Executive Director of the California Green Business Network. And what we do is we provide technical assistance to businesses with an easy-to-use sustainability framework. We then promote that business after they've made some changes that inevitably save them money by conserving resources. And in turn, we allow consumers to vote with their dollars by providing a green marketplace. So we have a directory listing and a Shop Green phone app that you can download. And the reason why Josh invited me here to speak briefly was because we really want to get businesses from your tribal regions certified. And we'd like to kind of invite you to be part of our network of professional sustainability professionals doing this work. We have all the training, the factory's built. We will give free access to all of our database and our green business program in a box, if you will, and our checklist. We just want to really get businesses certified in tribal regions of California and hopefully get you involved in our network as well. So we have a request for proposals, which Josh has put up here. It's due at the end of this month. If you need more time, just feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email and my phone number in the chat. But we'd love to have some involvement from tribal regions in getting your businesses certified. And what that does is give you access to all of our material as well. So thanks for that time, Josh. Really appreciate it.
Great, thank you so much, Joe. And here's, the RFP is actually in a Google Doc, which is the link in, Joe will provide the link in the chat. It's linked to in this, the PDF for this presentation, and it's also at the TribalP2 Action website. It's the latest blog post up there as well. So thank you, Joe. All right, so now hopping into the meat of the presentation, we're going to run through this process and talk about some specific opportunities we've identified at Pala and SanPasqual businesses. So instead of kind of running through this list, we're going to walk through it all together. And I do encourage you, for more information, to go to our webinar series to review these. You'll get a lot more information in depth regarding all these steps. And we basically, for each media specific webinar, where we focus on hazardous substances and then water and then energy, we rerun through the process and we focusing on the opportunity specific to that particular media area. So the very first step is selecting the target businesses or facilities, and we had selected, I believe, 7 or 8 at Pala and then 1 at Woods Valley. And I encourage you to think which businesses you'd want to target in doing P2 planning. I also do want to mention that P2 is an eligible activity under GAP. So you can have, and I did when I was working with the Chumash, you can have a P2 component where you have these types of assessment and planning activities and perhaps even implementation activities under your GAP grant. At least that used to be the case, and I wouldn't see why it would not still be so. But very briefly, John, I guess, why did you select Woods Valley for your project? Your
Josh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, we selected Woods Valley just because as a golf course, it had some of the things we thought we could reduce, such as water use, energy use, and then any sort of pesticides or chemical use to treat the grass. So we saw it as an opportunity to reduce those 3 things at the golf course going forward. And a little bit of a selfish reason, I don't really like golf courses. I think they're kind of a waste of resources. So anytime you can reduce those resources that you're putting on something like a golf course, I think it's better for everyone and the environment. People should get out and hike more rather than play golf, I think. But that's just my personal opinion. So, but yeah, so we chose the golf course for those 3 reasons. We want to figure out a way to reduce water, reduce energy, and then reduce any sort of chemicals going onto the golf course. Because the golf course is kind of narrow waterways, so anything that's put on the golf course will eventually make its way through a waterway. So it was a good one to work on. And the golf club was really interested in participating with this. They were really excited. They were really helpful. So I think that was really nice, because sometimes depending on who you choose, if they're not really receptive or they're not completely bought in, it can be difficult to achieve the goals you're trying to achieve with a P2 grant.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And Shasta, I'm not going to ask you why you chose the businesses you chose, because we basically chose every single business in there. So it seems unnecessary. But I think the bottom line of John's message is go hiking more. Okay, so the next, and actually this is the Pala RV resort, and this was purely chosen so we can sit by the pool and contemplate pollution prevention measures. Interestingly, this is one, of the businesses we chose, this is the one we're finding kind of the least number of opportunities, but again, we can go sit by the pool, so that's the most important thing. All right, so the next major step in this process is establishing and maintaining key relationships, as well as your core P2 planning team. And I'm not going to get into too much detail, but this is really kind of key for any particular project you're working on, is you really have to engage the key stakeholders early and often throughout this process. You need to make this project as much theirs. One kind of lesson learned here was just be respectful of their time as well. And I encourage you to, consider who should you involve in your P2 planning process. One kind of interesting thing we found when working with Paula is that the fleet department wasn't in the original scope of this project, but they serve all the businesses that we were trying to work with, and so we identified them as a good potential partner on this. And so, involving them, and not necessarily like as a key stakeholder in other businesses, but as a key kind of organization or facility serving these other businesses. So Shasta, I'll kick it over to you real quick. What are some tips for establishing and maintaining good relationships with the tribal business representatives that you're working with on these projects, or lessons learned?
Well, one thing I've been learning ever since I started at Pala nearly 16 years ago is that you can't assume that because you think a project is a good idea that everybody is going to think that project is a good idea. So you want to make sure that you are recognizing and valuing that these are other people's departments and programs that they've been running on their own just fine without your help. And so you need to approach them collaboratively and say, I'm not here to tell you to do things my way or that you have to change, but that we can do things together that are going to improve your operations and improve environmental health and quality for your community and your tribe in general. So, I would start with that, letting people know that you want to work with them, as opposed to doing a top-down where you say, well, I went to the tribal council and they said we're going to do this, so you have to. You want to make sure that you're working with people in a way that makes them feel like they're included as partners. And with some of our departments, that's been easier than others. So it's another good thing is to just develop that nice, thick, calloused skin and know that it's not necessarily you that they're angry at if you suggest something that they may not want to do. But be patient and keep trying, and eventually you'll get that buy-in.
Yeah, we've had great participation from all the business and facilities managers working over with Pala. One thing that lesson learned I'd like to share too is, in working with Pala and Shasta on a variety of projects, not just this one, it's just also to be mindful of the workload that the person you're requesting information from already has. I've overwhelmed poor Bob Halstead, the executive facilities director at the Pala Casino, with various information requests kind of earlier on when he got promoted to that position. And he's great. I love working with Bob, and I had to kind of scale it back and make it, what is my highest priority that I need from him right now, as opposed to sending him a giant laundry list of things that he doesn't have time to look into. So, be very respectful of the time and the resources that others have available to dedicate to your effort, and try to come at them with how you're bringing value to them, and have that be a constant theme throughout. This has got to be their project. This has got to be something that's going to benefit them if you want them to remain committed. So a next key step in the process, and I want to say that these are all iterative type steps. You may find yourself going back and forth between them as you proceed during this process. But it's determining your P2 goals, objectives, scope, media areas, and metrics. And so, this is, really kind of defining the scope of your efforts. And I think one thing here, why I bring up the Pala Casino is very large, and there's lots of departments. There's a lot going on here. So if you're going to try to work with a tribal casino that's as big or as larger than Pala's, then you may want to kind of maybe focus on an aspect of it first, depending on your resources. You may want to focus on the hotel or the restaurants or just the gaming floor. Or what the employees are directly involved in, or what the customers or guests are involved with. So, and kind of feel that out in conversations with those leaders and the facilities managers there as well. A major step in this process is gathering information and data. Ultimately, it's going to be difficult to identify opportunities and to show progress in addressing those opportunities if you don't both gather initial information and data to present those opportunities, and then continue to monitor and track that same information and data to show what you've actually accomplished to the extent that you've implemented opportunities you've identified. So, as I mentioned, there's a variety of resources we've mentioned here, and you can go to our website to learn more. But I want to ask Scott here, our project's focusing on water, hazardous substances, and energy, but I think, energy and water are fairly straightforward. Energy, you're kind of looking at utility bills. You usually can get that data from your utility. You may get monthly data or annual data. You can even get it at the interval data level at, as low as 15-minute intervals. And on the transportation side, you're primarily looking at probably fuel usage and mileage. Water, same thing. Hopefully you have meters. Hopefully you have some level of information, at least for the full facility, and hopefully, ideally at perhaps certain aspects of the facility. But I think hazardous substances are not quite as obvious as what you'd be looking for. So, Scott, what were you requesting here? What do you generally request from businesses in trying to address pollution prevention from hazardous substances at businesses and other organizations?
Thanks, Josh. So the first thing that we ask for is the top 10 to 20 procurement items. And now note that we don't start off with asking what are your 10 to 20 hazardous materials that you order. Don't rely on who you're asking to determine what's hazardous and what's not. So we just ask for the top 10 to 20 procurement items in general. For example, Pala Casino, they use a lot of cups. That's a big procurement item for them. So that's, and that's one, you can take what are the biggest items that they're purchasing, what are the biggest amounts of material that they're bringing in, and you can use that as a starting point to determine what can be reduced. The next, another piece of information we ask for are any waste records. Trash hauler bills, municipal solid waste weights, if they're making any money off of recycling, do they pay somebody? Do they pay a waste service to take that away? And then also, even if it's informally, what kind of waste? So for example, Pala Casino was able to tell us just kind of anecdotally that they estimated about 50% of their waste is food waste. So that's another area that we're able to start with the P2 analysis based on what their MSW is composed of. We also ask for hazardous waste manifests, copies of the manifests that are usually left behind by the hazardous waste haulers. And that tells us, how much hazardous waste is being produced. What another handy item to know is how much is being paid for that hauler to haul away the hazardous waste, because it's usually by weight. And also where it goes and what happens to it. Is the oil being recycled? Is something else being buried in a facility somewhere? On the water side, another very important thing to ask is water bills. That can tell us both the cost, what they're paying for water, and also how much is being used. A great example on this project where that came in handy is Pala does not have any metering on their wells, so it's hard for us to determine how much they're using. However, their agricultural groves occasionally have to buy water from the neighboring water district. So asking for those bills is able to tell us, they haven't done it in a couple of years, but based on their water bills from a couple of years ago, we were able to figure out what their water usage was. And lastly, something you may need to ask for are things like vendor names, contract costs, things like that for services that are provided where there may be some P2 overlap.
Good, thanks, Scott. And one thing too, as you're submitting your data requests, you may see crossover between different categories. And I think when we're focusing on energy, water, and hazardous substances, but as we identify other opportunities, in the waste realm, technically that's not pollution prevention, but I think it's important to continue to identify and pursue and recommend or analyze those opportunities. And even just some straight up cost savings on the energy side of things. When we started diving into their energy bills using the SDG&E portal, we identified that they were not actually on the ideal rate schedule and that they could simply save money by just switching their rate schedule. So it wasn't actually a change to their energy usage. And I think the total cumulative between all Pala's accounts was almost $100,000 when we first looked at that on some separate energy analysis that we've been doing. That's key to both identify those opportunities and continue to track them. So once you've gathered that information and data, then you will proceed with identifying the various pollution prevention related opportunities in your target areas and beyond. So as I mentioned, don't just focus on those specific areas. You may see some very juicy opportunities that you'll want to communicate, even if they don't have a specific environmental benefit. Certainly you don't want to, hopefully not recommend things that are detrimental to the environment, but ultimately that's up to the business leaders to make decisions on. And that's also a way to continue to have their buy-in. If you're bringing them particularly cost savings related opportunities, they'll be more likely to support you in moving forward. Scott, again, briefly mention what you found over at the Woods Valley Golf Club, particularly focusing on water.
So yeah, exactly, Josh. The big opportunity with Woods Valley is water conservation. So Woods Valley Golf Club uses approximately 380,000 gallons of water per day. And of course, they're located here in Southern California. It's very arid. So reducing that water demand is the top of the list for our P2 opportunities. So they're already getting recycled water from the water district. They're getting a little over 40,000 gallons a day for that. However, they apparently with golf courses, you can only use so much recycled water. It's nutritionally not very good for the golf course. So they're limited with how much recycled water they can use. A couple of opportunities, the biggest opportunity that we found, and we haven't completed the cost analysis completely yet, but one idea is turf replacement. So right now, the golf course is pretty much, it's hard to tell in this picture, but it's just about all grass that has to be maintained, watered, fertilized, and all of that. So reducing the amount of turf that is landscaped that way into more drought tolerant, more native, less water demanding turf and landscaping would reduce that water, we think, by somewhere around 30 to 40%. So, and they could also get a $3 square foot rebate for replacing that. So obviously they can't replace the turf on playable surfaces like their greens and fairways, but all of the area around that, they can replace with more drought tolerant and a little more natural to the climate and landscape there to reduce their water demand. Another idea that we had for water conservation, and this probably won't result in as big a savings, but right now they have an area where they wash their golf carts off, and they have another area where they just hose down their maintenance vehicles. One idea that we're looking into is installing closed loop wash racks that would completely recycle that water and reuse that water for both the golf course carts and the back in the maintenance area for their maintenance vehicles.
Thank you, Scott. And then I don't think you mentioned it, we're still looking into the waterway between two of the holes that transfers some of the irrigation water. So I think, we're looking into either adding a pipe or lining that channel, because a lot of the water transferred from one reservoir to another is infiltrating back into the groundwater, which is, okay for the environment, I suppose, but they're then having to purchase that much more from the water district and then spending that much more energy and repumping it out.
Yeah, so I neglect to mention that. Yeah, so all of their ponds, and I think they have 6 of them, are linked by underground pipes, except for one, and that's a natural lined channel. And yeah, so there's the natural infiltration into the soil, and also that channel is really heavily vegetated. So you can notice just by visually looking at it a difference in flow from what's going out of the upstream pond into the downstream ponds. But we are doing some flow analysis on it to try to get an idea of how much water they're losing and see if it's going to be worth it to install a pipe like the other ponds.
And that's the picture in the upper right is part of that waterway. Thanks, Scott. Exactly. Okay, so once you've identified your P2 opportunities in your target areas, then you need to come back and in an earlier process, you would have identified kind of metrics and criteria for selecting. Actually, no, I guess as part of this process, you'll start to establish ranking criteria for these projects of which you want to prioritize. And in this case, I want to bring it back over to Shasta and John. Is what are some of the key criteria that you are using to evaluate, or your businesses are using to prioritize the various projects, including the P2 ones we're bringing to them?
Shasta, you want to go first, or you want me to take this?
No.
Well, like it's kind of like what we were talking about. It's just savings on for us at the Woods Valley Golf Course. The most important was saving on water, because that would mean savings in money for the golf course. You heard how much water they use a day, so that's quite a bit of money for us at the golf course.
So, for us,
Shasta, any key ones?
Yeah, because we have just so many businesses that we evaluated for this, there's not necessarily one overarching theme that emerges. And obviously saving money is important, but I would say that, beyond looking at some of the potential sort of classic pollutants that you would think of, things like pesticides and motor oil and things of that nature, one of our overarching themes for analysis is just how can we save money and then increase sustainability in terms of the types of products that we use, and then also other ways to reduce sort of more nebulous things like greenhouse gas emissions. So, we've done a lot of work on how we can integrate, solar and sustainable energy into these businesses. So that's on a broader scale, but it's something that we're continuously working on.
In the water realm, and we're working on utilities codes and other things too, regarding water use at the reservation. Pala and among many other tribes are heavily relying upon groundwater basins that are used by others and are depleting over time. So that that can be kind of a key metric in evaluation for that. What's the groundwater recharge in addition to just basic water use. Some other kind of areas that aren't as obvious beyond saving money, saving energy, saving water, reducing pollution from hazardous substances are health impacts on both employees and guests at these businesses. That can be public relations and marketing value. We talked about the California Green Business Network certification, and there are others out there. And then just value in community engagement too. That can be a metric you measure is how many people are becoming aware, how many people are becoming engaged in these opportunities, which can go hand in hand with marketing and just, can provide value for your business. So there's others beyond that as well. So here's, we'll bring Scott back on real quick to discuss some of the opportunities. I think there's one or two, kind of one primary one we discovered. This is the Pala's Fox Raceway, motocross raceway. And Scott, can you explain the main opportunity we discovered here?
Sure. So the reason we kind of wanted to talk about this when it wasn't one because this wasn't an opportunity that we were expecting. We thought when we first saw Fox Raceway scoped, obviously the first pollution prevention idea, we thought it was automotive stuff. Well, it turns out they don't actually produce a whole lot of automotive related waste. However, so Fox Raceway is a motocross track, a dirt motocross track. I think they have 3 of them together into a complex. The raceway uses between 44 and 64,000 gallons per day, almost per day, every day, to water down their track just for dust control and also for maintenance reasons. So that's a lot of water that they're using. They're using it out of 3 wells that they have on site there. Just on the other side of the hill from them, though, is the wastewater treatment plant that fully recycles water. It's a tertiary wastewater treatment plant. So one idea that we had was to get the water to the raceway. So that would either be by the trucks having to drive around the hill to get to them, which is about 1.5 miles each way, to fill up with recycled water, or pump or pipe the water over to the raceway. Right now at the wastewater treatment plant, only about 15% of the treated water that they produce is being used. The rest of it's getting pumped back into the aquifer, which is not a bad thing, but we feel that more of that treated water can be used by the tribal businesses. So that's definitely a big opportunity that we're looking at.
Great, thanks, Scott. Okay, so then the kind of we're talking about kind of doing a first cut analysis of this. So you want to kind of throw everything against the wall, see kind of what sticks, see what makes sense, apply your prioritization criteria to it, and then likely you're going to have a limited time and resources. You're not going to be able to go into depth on every single opportunity you identify. So you may select the top 1, 2, 3, how many ever. It kind of depends on the actual opportunities themselves, and then you can complete some advanced analysis, feasibility study, and detailed planning for those specific opportunities. What you're really seeking to do here is facilitate decision making. You haven't necessarily received a decision, a green light on this at this point, likely, and you need to provide them more information. What's the cost? What are the cost savings? What are the environmental benefits? And what are the other benefits that are going to be gained? And what are the non-monetary costs too associated with this? And so I pulled up right in here the Pala transfer station, and again, I'll kind of bring it over to Scott to share a few opportunities we found at this property?
So the transfer station is where most of the waste from the reservation is consolidated and sorted, and then most of it's sent off-site to be disposed of eventually. They collect all the haz waste from the reservation, all the green waste as well. So there's a couple opportunities we found. One is that people drops large items off that are not necessarily trash. They just don't want them anymore. And these get donated. Sometimes they get sold. It's kind of an informal process, but one idea that we had to help with that is to set up some sort of a thrift shop to resell some of these items, so they don't end up in the trash, but nobody, the limited number of people that they're reaching out to don't want them. So that was one idea. We thought that was kind of a low cost, low effort solution to do. Another idea that we had, not really a waste reduction or pollution prevention idea for the transfer station, but for some synergy that we found with another tribal business, is the transfer station produces different grades of green waste. And they will process that into mulch. And some of the mulch is very high quality. Across the road and down the road for them are the tribal agricultural businesses, the Citrus Groves Vineyard and Avocado Grove. They could be using this mulch. So right now the transfer station sells the mulch, but they have a lot of it and it just kind of sits there. So there's a synergy opportunity we identified where the agricultural groves could be using that mulch.
Thanks, Scott. So you kind of jumped ahead to some of the P2 opportunities we've been focusing on for the groves and the vineyard as well. So I thought I'd pull up that. So, you've done your advanced analysis, your initial planning for these opportunities, and now you're going to present the analysis results and initial plans to the key stakeholders. You may do some reprioritization based on your criteria, which may be the same, may have changed slightly based on what you found from that. And hopefully at this point, you're going to be obtaining their buy-in and support for proceeding, and then you're developing your P2 action plan based on what has been approved to move forward with. You'll then work on developing your P2 action plan that will really lays out the process. I mean, it's very important to have this document to ensure that everybody's clear on where you're going, who's responsible, what are the timelines, what are the costs, and other key things you want to track. Keep these things moving forward. So I had prepared a template that you can use. It looks very similar to the ETAP templates, the EPA Tribal Environmental Plans that I had used before, and likely we'll have some form of that in the ultimate plans we develop for the Pala and SanPasqual businesses, and I'll pull that up real quick. But you can kind of note what are your long-term P2 goals for a specific business or overall, and then what are the activities, what's the time frame for completing those, what are the expected deliverables, what performance metrics you're going to use to evaluate performance on that. And then there's various other information. I think, kind of responsibilities, or at least, primary responsibilities is very critical. And using this as a tool to come back to just to monitor and track progress. So you don't have to use this exact tool. We will post this on our website as well when we finally get the final templates up. But I find that it's important not to just have a very lengthy document, but I like having an action plan that's succinct, that tells you what your objectives are, who's responsible. You can more easily track and see that. It's good to have a narrative that provides details that back up and support the analysis, so somebody can go back to it. Things will change, but I like developing a kind of a living plan where you can also continue to adjust priorities, adjust objectives, because you may find you've identified a specific opportunity that you want to proceed with, and then at some further point down the road, it just isn't feasible. So you still have resources. What's the next step that you want to move your focus onto? So that's kind of the P2 planning process, and I wish I had kind of the full one right here. As I mentioned, it's an iterative process, and you kind of you may find yourself going back and forth between steps and then also repeating the process as you continue to identify and implement opportunities. It's definitely a cyclical thing. So now we're going to move into P2 implementation. And here's, the kind of 5 main steps that we're going to run through in the remaining 15 minutes. So I'm not going to get back into too much detail, but again, key stakeholder outreach, commitment, and engagement. You really need to ensure that not just in the planning process, but also in the implementation stage, the action stage, that you have those key stakeholders involved. If you're not implementing the opportunities you've identified, you're not going to reap the cost savings and pollution prevention benefits that you're striving to achieve. So, that's kind of the challenge, and that's why it's important to develop an actionable plan, is to move into implementation. So many times I've been involved in projects where these great plans have been developed that go up and sit on a shelf, and no activities are actually implemented, and then the ultimate opportunities and savings that have been identified are just, they're not actually achieved. So, maintaining those relationships throughout the process and establishing new partnerships. The partnerships may be different when you move into the implementation phase. You may be involving people who aren't involved in the planning phase. Those, I would say line level workers, shop level workers who may not have provided as much input, although I do encourage you to try to involve them in the planning phase as well. But ultimately, they may be the ones implementing a specific opportunity, and you'll need further engagement involvement. So at the, I guess the Pala Enterprises, the Pala, we'll kind of say under the Pala Casino umbrella is not just the casino, which includes the hotel and the spa. The RV resort is also under that umbrella, as well as the gas station too. And so the Pala Enterprise HR department oversees and provides training for all of these employees. So I think that's, part of the engagement process is engaging the employees. And we are seeking to work with, on the casino side, these businesses, and then on for the other enterprises, actually through the government HR department. But this is the process that we're going through that Michael will briefly walk us through for training employees at these facilities.
Right, yeah, so staff training and communications really are, I guess it's obvious, maybe goes without saying, they're critical to ensure that operational procedures are up to date and that everyone understands the tribal goals for preventing pollution and saving money, as well as really their roles in achieving those goals. So early in the process, even before the action plan is finalized, we'll engage with HR and other management staff to learn about their current training processes and communications channels. Then when the P2 goals and specific measures are ready for implementation, then we're ready to work with the HR staff to develop the specific materials and modules that'll fit into their current processes. That way we avoid reinventing the wheel, and we make sure that the materials and the processes can easily be integrated and quickly begin supporting the tribe's P2 goals. And finally, training materials really need to be adaptable. That means building them from generic templates that can be customized for specific businesses or for business processes. And that way they can really become a long-term training resource and support other P2 measures that the tribe might want to pursue in the future. I think that's all I had. Josh, did I miss anything?
No, I think, I'll just reiterate the key thing here is don't try to do training using pathways that don't already exist. The HR departments, both at the Pala Casino and the government, they already communicate and train employees in various ways, and we don't want them to reinvent the wheel. They've expressed some willingness to develop some new ones, but we want to start with what they're doing, what's easiest for them to implement, not just for them, but also for the environmental department, because in terms of updating and providing new content, we want to make it easy for Shasta and her staff to do that and not have to manage their own program. We don't want Pala environmental staff having to go in to be involved in every new hire training. Like, they can provide a video that can be integrated into the existing 2-day training activities that they already have. And then, same thing with the existing employee training. There's various channels through email, through loops in the employee cafeteria on the TV, and other ways that we can actually use some of the same content to communicate it to existing employees that won't learn it when because they weren't hired before this all was launched. An important thing to at least keep in mind through all this, and this isn't just in the implementation phase, but also in the planning stage, is just good project management, and that's actually what the action plan is for me. Is the project management tool. We have some kind of basic phases of project management and various tools we've shared. I'm a huge fan of Excel. I've used Smartsheet as well, and I'm familiar with some other ones I don't have any direct experience with. But you really want to ensure that you're managing and monitoring. You want to really establish the expectations, who's involved, maintain accountability, what are they actually working toward, and be able to monitor, measure, evaluate progress and actually achieving the goals you set out to achieve. So just, an important thing to keep in mind and ensure that when you're pulling this all together, try to integrate it into a project management tool that you can use throughout and repeatedly use as you continue to move through different opportunities. I pull up the SanPasqual Tribal Government Complex Microgrid project. Michael Burr is actually, this broke ground, so congratulations to John and the tribe on getting this finally, finally getting the shovels in the ground. They're starting to break ground on the solar, and this is going to provide the solar will cover 100% of the electrical load for their entire government complex, and it'll allow it to fully island. But this is a complex project, and we've had to do project management through kind of writing the grant, initial grant proposal, to the procurement phase of actually identifying and selecting contractors, through design engineering and into implementation. And this is going to be, probably a lot more complex than a lot of the P2 measures we're talking about doing. But at the same time, I think a lot of the same concepts apply. I also do want to mention, we are focusing way more on water and hazardous substances. We have a lot of energy-related things that we will continue to offer and share and communicate as we post additional resources on the website. And you can go and look at the roundtable and the webinar that we posted on the website for those particular topics as well. Next key implementation step is data and performance metric tracking and evaluation. And this is going to be, I think, critical for ongoing success. I mean, ultimately, you're trying to show that you can achieve certain environmental and cost savings through the measures you've identified. And if you didn't establish a baseline, if you're not tracking this on an ongoing basis, then you're not going to be able to demonstrate the success you want to be able to demonstrate, and that's going to probably hurt you in not only implementing the specific measure you're seeking to implement at that point, but then also it's going to help. It's probably going to hurt you moving forward in trying to get support for implementing additional measures. So the measures we talked about already: energy use, water use, the amount of hazardous substances that you're purchasing that are in your products through procurement or that are otherwise being disposed of. As well. And there's a variety of metrics that you likely identify from the beginning, and you want to at least, I think, refresh your database on an annual basis and compare them annually to see what improvements you can see, to the extent that you can isolate a specific opportunity through a sub-meter or through a procurement pathway for a particular item, such as cups. Then you'll be able to show the difference in your performance in both environmental and cost savings related. And I just down at the bottom included water. Every drop counts, and it could be irrigation line breaks. Could be, in terms of water, it could be just better tracking your irrigation usage and addressing line breaks, which happen on a regular basis, and in terms of actually saving both water and money in that realm. An important thing to do too is to communicate those successes and leverage them into moving forward. So I talked about trying to track your performance metrics and to ensure that you get support for implementing additional measures. At the same time too, there's various certifications and recognition you can go out and pursue. We've already mentioned the California Green Business Network. The Water Sense label is a certification you can achieve. And that was, included on the last slide. Energy Stars, another certification you get for buildings and facilities as well. And these are great marketing. They show that you're at the forefront and a leader in these areas. And so you not only receive those cost savings, but you'll get the added benefit of being able to market your business as green, and you know, as Joe mentioned before too, you know, people are really voting with their pocketbooks, voting with their wallets. So you know, give people an opportunity to show and to purchase, come and use your services, buy your products by showing that you're a green business. And so Shasta, in terms of communicating, leveraging success, I guess, you know, is there any kind of main things you're going to seek to do or are doing to communicate and leverage success on your various projects?
Well, one thing is totally unrelated, which is that we have a 4-minute warning on how much time we have left. But also communicating primarily, we put a lot of things on our website. We like to keep people updated in that way, and we do social media sharing. And you know, some of this stuff is not that exciting. Like, you don't necessarily want to put on your Instagram, hey, we kept, you know, 5 quarts of oil out of the stream. You know, people don't really get that excited about it. But if you can put it into ways that are that get to people's own personal feelings about something that's important, you can focus it in that regard. So we are keeping Pala's waterways clean through this program. And that's something that gets people's attention because they care. It's about the things that they see. So just make sure that you're focusing those things on, you know, kind of the sexy aspects of pollution prevention, of which there are very few, but there are ways to make it so that it gets to people on a personal level. So the website, social media, I think are great ways to share that, especially with the younger folks.
And this is on behalf of SanPasqual and John and their efforts in the EPA tribal annual conferences, but this mug right here is actually, I think, from either 2019 or 2018, I think San Francisco. You cannot see the label on it anymore, but it's still a perfectly good mug, and it's staying out of the waste stream and preventing me from using reusable ones. So, and there's Shasta's right there. So thank you, John. I really like this mug. I like the extra large ones. So hopefully when we go back to the next one. Yeah, and so yeah, we're wrapping up now. Thanks for the reminder, Shasta. And actually, I think we're on the last few slides or so. So, you know, as I mentioned, this is a cyclical process. Reviewing and updating the TribalP2 Action Plan and your assessment is something that should be done on a regular basis. I think, you know, you want to monitor and perhaps even update it on a monthly or quarterly basis, but, you know, do more full review and update on an annual basis. I like to have a plan that's, like, as I mentioned, kind of a living perpetual plan that's covering the next 2 to 4 years. So every time you do that annual update, you add a year on the back end. And you adjust your plan accordingly, and then do, like, you know, a full complete reassessment every 2 to 4 years to the extent you have the resources to do so. You know, can just be that your kind of brief annual updates are enough for you and your community. So as a reminder, the TribalP2 Action resources are at our website, tribalp2action.org. We'll be adding various resources, additional resources, including step-by-step guidance, sample plans from Pala and SanPasqual, templates for doing both your assessments and for developing your own plans, case studies for each of these businesses, as well as best management practices and strategies that may be applicable to your businesses there. I encourage you to subscribe at our website. So there's a widget down at the bottom that you can subscribe to and join our list. We'll share with you when these are updated and when the new resources are available. And there's plenty of resources there right now as well. So please visit us there. And I really want to thank everybody. I don't see any questions, and we only have a minute left to go anyways. So, you know, thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Shasta and John for all the work you've been doing and allowing us to work with these tribes and these activities. Thank you, Michael and Scott, for all the work you're doing to support, prosper, and bringing and identifying these opportunities for the tribes. And then Joe for the California Green Business Network for offering $5,000 for tribes right now to just go get certified. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.